Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
Mr. Lewin, sit down.
Tensions are high in California as closing arguments heat up in the Robert Durst trial. We'll take you inside the courtroom. And the federal trial of singer R. Kelly continues. We'll bring you the latest on the case. But first, the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks.
So I felt it was really something I wanted to do as an act of passion, and of all my practice areas, it gives me the most satisfaction.
We sit down with attorney David Eisenbrook, who breaks down the details of the Victims' Compensation Fund. Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. A somber day is ahead as the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks quickly approaches. As we honor those lives lost, we take a closer look at how the tragedy continues to affect us today. Terry Austin has more.
Brian, I spoke with attorney David Eisbrook about his involvement with the Victims' Compensation Fund. He explains where the money comes from and who is eligible. Tell me a little bit, David, about the Victims' Compensation Fund. What was the whole purpose of that? Has it actually avoided litigation?
In an instance like this, when you're trying to prove the injuries, specifically cancers and respiratory, but specifically cancers, and if this was to go to a trial or a tribunal and had to prove the liability aspect of this case, it would be very difficult. So the purpose of this fund was to eliminate that hurdle. It was to eliminate the fight of proving the liability. So liability is a given here, and then the fund was created to compensate those people with cancers and respiratory who lived below Canal Street during the 8 months following 9/11, which is very important. Most people think I had to be down there during 9/11 or the day after. But this fund covers individuals who lived or worked in the area for the 8 months following 9/11.
And where is this funding coming from, David?
That would be the U.S. government.
And so is it renewed on a regular basis?
The fund, as I said before, was signed into law by President Obama in 2009. It was scheduled to expire in December 2020. You may remember that Jon Stewart headed the effort and championed the effort to extend the fund to what they like to call a permanent basis. But that permanent basis technically is until 2090. So what that means is that if a child was born on 9/11 or during the time after 9/11, and they were there for those 8 months, which is the prerequisite, and they're 90 years old in 2090, and they develop a cancer at any time during their lifetime, they would be compensated.
One last question. Do you think that we will continue to get funding for the Victims' Compensation Fund? Is there any risk that it will not continue to be funded?
Excellent question. With politics, there's always a risk. But I think what we saw with the renewal of the act, which was originally called the Zadroga Act, named after a first responder, was that it became a bipartisan issue, that a senator and congressman would be very hard pressed to vote against anything that relates to this fund or the compensation of the victims. So whereas the act has extended through 2090 and almost $9 billion has already been paid, the government, as far as I understand, has earmarked funds to continue with the payments through 2090. Can we guarantee nothing's going to happen in the future? No, but I'd say this is one of the safer federal funds that will be protected for a very long time to come.
Joining us today is the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg, and Terry Austin. Dave, I wanted to ask you a different question, but I found out an amazing thing about you. You actually took a trip down to a hearing for one of the Guantanamo Bay detainees. We all can't see what happened in these proceedings. Give us a glimpse as to what you saw.
Yeah, Brian, and hello, Terry. It was different than what a lot of us expected, because what we had heard was Camp X-ray, torture, poor conditions, when we actually saw the opposite. This was about 4 years ago. We went down to Camp Justice and we watched the hearing, and the big question was whether or not the detainee who was involved with 9/11 was allowed to have Netflix on his laptop computer. So you can see it's very different than it was before. And if you go into their holding cells, there's a big arrow on the ground which points them to where Mecca is so they can pray in the right direction. And they're treated pretty well, much better than they were before. And so what we're seeing now is perhaps the pendulum has swung the opposite side, where they're treated better than many Americans would want them to be treated, rather than how it was before, when it was an embarrassment that we were torturing them.
I can definitely say in Rikers in New York, not many detainees are Netflixing and chilling while they're waiting for their case to be heard in state court. So definitely a big swing in the pendulum. Terry, did you get the impression from your conversation with David that the number of claims being filed has slowed down?
Not at all, Brian. He mentioned that there have been 67,000 claims since the inception of the fund in 2009. But just in 2021, there have been over 8,000 claims. So I think as people become more and more aware of the Victims' Compensation Fund, and as they begin to develop cancers and respiratory illnesses, it takes decades sometimes, David told me. I think we'll begin to see even more claims filed, and hopefully we'll have enough money for that.
As an adopted New Yorker, I hope both of those things, that we make sure to have those funds and continue to support those affected by the 9/11 tragedy. Thank you both. In Nebraska, a man faces more than 50 years in prison after authorities say he filmed himself hanging a toddler by the neck until she lost consciousness multiple times. 38-year-old David John Coleman was sentenced on Tuesday after pleading guilty to 2 counts of child abuse resulting in serious bodily injury. Officials say the victim was the 2-year-old daughter of Coleman's girlfriend. According to reports, Coleman took the girl to a storage unit and hung her by her neck with a scarf until she couldn't breathe. Coleman recorded multiple videos of this on his phone. After finding the videos, the toddler's mother called the police. In unrelated charges, Coleman is also a convicted sex offender and 9-time felon. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, an explosion in the courtroom as closing arguments continue in Robert Durst murder trial. Listen in as the defense and prosecution butt heads. But first, the latest in R. Kelly's federal racketeering trial. What's happening inside the courtroom next.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Now to the federal trial against R. Kelly. As with most days in the trial of R. Kelly, supporters flocked to the Brooklyn federal courthouse to show support for Robert Kelly. This time they played the disgraced king of R&B's Step in the Name of Love as prosecutors stepped into the federal courthouse ready to go forward with their sex trafficking and RICO case against R. Kelly. The prosecution is expected to rest their case against R. Kelly next week. So far, accuser after accuser has testified about the sometimes bizarre, manipulative, and sexually illegal acts R. Kelly forced upon young women, girls, and one boy. The prosecution is arguing that this was a criminal enterprise with R. Kelly at the top, controlling an intricate web of assistants, security guards, and others to facilitate his desire to have sex with unwilling and sometimes underage women. The defense is arguing that these girls lied about their age and the women are exaggerating their claims of sexual assault. After the prosecution rests, the defense will have an opportunity to put on their case before a jury decides R. Kelly's fate. Will people testify on behalf of R. Kelly? Will the defense put on evidence showing his innocence? Or will the king take the stand in his own defense? With no cameras in court, Law and Crime Daily will bring you expert legal analysis of all the twists and turns in this high-profile case. Let's bring back State Attorney of Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg, and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, at least for you, what is left for the prosecution to prove that R. Kelly transported women for sex and was at the head of a racketeering enterprise to have sex with women, girls, and boys?
Well, the indictment specifically alleges that Kelly was transporting these people for sex and that he was the head of this enterprise. We've already seen witnesses who testified that he was transporting them for sex, that he bought plane tickets. But I think what the prosecution needs to do, if they haven't done so already, is to introduce actual plane records of tickets being purchased and other obvious evidence of things that have happened to corroborate what's going on. As far as the enterprise is concerned, if there are any texts or emails where they see Kelly directing individuals to do something on his behalf, say buy a plane ticket, I think they need to introduce that as well.
Absolutely. Now, Dave, the prosecution is focusing on the sexual acts. The defense is focusing on this isn't a criminal enterprise. Where should the jury be focusing on this case?
Yeah, the prosecutors have used RICO to get into evidence some things that could not come in a state case for like underage sex, because there's a statute of limitations issue if you just charge it as it is. But if you add it to a RICO case as part of the predicate acts for a racketeering case, then it comes in. So you can see why the defense is upset about RICO. And the defense will say, well, RICO is made for the mafia. This is not the mafia. But that's old school. RICO is not just for the mafia anymore. It's for large schemes that are ongoing that involve 2 or more predicate crimes, and that would be what R. Kelly is accused of doing. And so I think the prosecution needs to focus on the evidence, the stories from the individuals who have testified so passionately at trial, and I think that'll lead to a conviction.
Absolutely. Now, as the R. Kelly trial continues, I sat down with the singer's former attorney on his federal Brooklyn case, still represents him on other cases, attorney Steve Greenberg, who gives us his thoughts on the case thus far. Take a listen.
So far, I don't think the government's moved the needle. You know, they've proven perhaps that R. Kelly is a sexual deviant. They probably established that he likes underage girls. They've certainly established that he spread herpes, but those really aren't the crimes at issue here. What we're talking about here is a RICO enterprise. So did R. Kelly have people who worked for him, associated with him, friends, family, employees, whatever the case may be, it doesn't have to be a formal structure, who went out and helped him to commit criminal acts? Did he have people who went out and recruited underage girls from? And I don't think the government's moved the needle on that.
We'll hear more from attorney Steve Greenberg next week as Law&Crime Daily celebrates the renewal of our show and the start of the second season. Tune in on Monday for that one-on-one interview. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, an unexpected delay in the federal trial of Elizabeth Holmes, why the courtroom was empty on day 3 and won't be back in session until Tuesday. Plus, the defense begins its closing arguments in Robert Durst's murder trial. Will he be acquitted of a murder again? Welcome back. Now to our coverage in the Stanley Ford trial out of Ohio. Firefighters took the stand Friday where the defendant is accused of murdering 9 people in his neighborhood by setting fires. Ford is charged in connection with 3 fires between April 2016 and May 2017. On Friday, the trial honed in on the second deadly fire where a family of 7 died by smoke inhalation. Most of the victims were children younger than 15. The youngest victim was only 16 months old. A fire investigator took the stand Friday, detailing what he found while inspecting the home, including the gruesome details of when he found the bodies.
This is how they appeared
The infant
initially.
And B was,
Kyle Huggins.
and how old was Kyle?
Kyle was 5 years old.
Okay. And then victim C,
Victim C, Deja Huggins, 6-year-old female. She was recovered underneath her father, Dennis Huggins.
victim D,
Victim D, Olivia Huggins, 3-year-old female. She was also recovered underneath her father, Dennis Huggins.
and victim E,
Victim E, Angela Huggins, the 38-year-old female. She's laying on her back.
An unexpected delay in the federal trial of Elizabeth Holmes as a jury is potentially exposed to COVID-19. The former Theranos CEO is charged with 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The charges stem from her work at the now-defunct company, where she claimed to be revolutionizing the world of blood testing. During her time as CEO, Holmes convinced investors to donate $700 million to the company. Later investigations determined the organization had serious problems. If convicted, 37-year-old Holmes could face up to 2 decades in prison. In an emergency Zoom meeting on Thursday, juror number 9 revealed he had potentially been exposed to the virus over Labor Day weekend and is awaiting test results. As of now, court is expected to reconvene on Tuesday. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden announced a COVID-19 vaccine mandate on Thursday, which could affect upwards of 100 million people. Though it's facing some backlash, our legal experts say the measure is constitutional. The proposal would issue new rules mandating any business with 100 or more employees to enforce vaccine compliance or maintain weekly testing. That also means businesses must provide paid time off for employees to receive free vaccines. The president faced pushback from anti-vaxxers and protesters, but legal experts tell Law&Crime Daily the measures are within the president's allowance. Erwin Kierminski, the dean of Berkeley Law School, tells Law&Crime, quote, "There is no constitutional problem with requiring people to be vaccinated. The government could require everyone to be vaccinated against COVID. This was resolved by the Supreme Court in 1905. New York University law professor Roderick Hills doubles down, citing the Oshawa law. Quote, "The Oshawa Act rule is certainly constitutional. The federal government has regulated workplace safety since 1970, when Nixon signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act into law." A California man was indicted by a federal grand jury after authorities say he killed his 2 young children with a spearfishing gun, all in the name of QAnon. Back in August, 40-year-old Matthew Taylor Coleman was arrested after confessing to the murders. He told authorities he drove from his California home across the border to Mexico, where he shot his 2-year-old son and 10-month-old daughter in the chest with a spearfish gun. He says he was saving the world from the children's serpent DNA as he believed they were, quote, "going to grow up into monsters." Coleman was charged in the U.S. District Court on 2 counts of foreign first-degree murder of U.S. nationals. If convicted, Taylor could face the death penalty. When we come back, explosive closing arguments in the trial of Robert Durst. What to expect as this murder trial finally wraps up. Welcome back to Law&Crime Daily. After weeks of back and forth, the Robert Durst trial has finally reached closing arguments, with the defense beginning its closings. Robert Durst is charged with the first-degree murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, who was found shot in the head in 2000. Prosecutors say Durst murdered Berman because she had information about his wife, Kathy, who went missing in 1982. Though a body has never been found, Durst is also suspected of killing her. After days of the state's closing arguments, the defense began their closing on Thursday, with attorney Dick DeGuerin representing the real estate heir.
And I am proud to stand before you and defend Robert Durst when almost no one in the world would do so. I wouldn't blame you after hearing what you heard for these 5 months if you hate Bob Durst and believe he's a liar. But making Bob Durst a liar does not make him a killer. They have to bring evidence.
Outside the presence of the jury, prosecutor John Lewin argued about the defense's closing, where Dick DeGuerin brought up unspoken evidence from the Galveston trial. Things got heated in the courtroom.
That is absolutely unethical and unprofessional. Number one, you cannot legally stand up and say, quote, "There is a bunch of evidence from Galveston that you did not hear." That is per se misconduct. If a prosecutor did that...
Okay, calm down, Mr. Lewin. Stop shouting. Stop shouting. Stop shouting. It is not appropriate in the court for you to be shouting.
Well, I'm trying to...
I am addressing your tone, which is not appropriate. You objected. I sustain the objection. I agree with you.
Your Honor,
he shifted.
You are first 3 objections. You overruled them.
Mr. Lewin, sit down. Sit down.
Court, what would you have done if I would have said something half that way? You would have been irate with purpose and with reason.
I don't get irate.
Your Honor, Your Honor.
No, listen, Mr.
That's beyond misconduct.
Mr. Yeah, wait.
What are we doing?
I don't know what, Mr. Chesnoff, I don't. No, thank you.
Dave, your reaction to how Lewin handled the defense's closing arguments?
Well, Brian, I can see why he was upset. I mean, this case has been going on for a couple months, and in the closing arguments, here you have the defense lawyer saying, hey, there's other evidence you don't know about, and if a prosecutor did that, it would be a mistrial. But because it's the defense lawyer doing it, it's different, and because this case has taken so long, the judge is not going to just say, we're going to do it all over again. So the defense lawyer knew that. So this is best to be dealt with by the bar as opposed to the judge, and the lawyer, prosecutor Lewin, should not have gotten so hot under the collar because the judge sustained the objection, can give a correcting instruction to the jury, and then they should move on. So, I've got my basset hound with me, Brian, here at work today, and what the judge did to the prosecutor was essentially spray water in his face, and perhaps he deserved it because of his tone.
I would agree there. A little spray of the water to tell him, sit down. He was right, but probably didn't handle it the right way. Terry, it just takes one. Infamous words by any defense attorney, but do you see even a single argument a juror can jump onto in the defense's summation?
Well, a little bit. I think I predicted that DeGuerin would do what he did, which is saying that there's no proof that Kathy Durst died and that there's no motive for Durst to kill Susan Berman, therefore, and he was never convicted of killing Morris Black. The other thing that he did I thought was good was he said that just because Durst is a liar doesn't mean he's a killer.
I think that's a good point. I think probably one of the strongest points because he was kind of a liar. Thank you both, and thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.